Now, if you've ever had a WordPress site feel slow, unresponsive, clunky, or just unreliable, generally the first thing that get blamed are the tools, the builder, things like it's Elementor, it's WooCommerce, there's too many plugins, it's WordPress itself. And while sometimes that is part of the problem, but often the bigger issue is the platform that it actually sits on. Now, before we go any further, a portion of this video is sponsored by Cloudways, but as always, I won't be providing any opinions. I'm just simply going to demonstrate some of those key features so you can make a more informed decision for yourself. So to get started, let's just strip away all the usual nonsense and fluff and focus on what actually matters when choosing a hosting platform for WordPress. Because this is what happens. The site starts to slow down and the admin starts to feel slow and clunky. The shop feels sluggish, clients start asking questions, and you end up wasting loads of time tweaking plugins, testing caching settings, and chasing fixes that never seem to solve the actual underlying root problem. Because if the platform is wrong, then everything you build on top of it becomes much harder to manage or scale. So before blaming the builder or the tools, it's worth asking a much better question. Are you trying to fix a site problem or a platform problem? So ultimately, that's what this video is really about. If the build is poor, better hosting simply won't hide that. But if the site is well built and still feels slow, especially in the admin or on dynamic pages, then the platform becomes a much bigger part of the conversation. And for agencies, the pain is not just page speed. It's lost time, frustrated clients, and much more support work on a site that gets worse as traffic, products, or features start to increase. So keeping that in mind, what should you actually look for when choosing a platform? So for me, one of the first questions I ask is how it handles dynamic requests. Now, caching can help, but WordPress sites are not just a series of collection of cached pages. So WooCommerce, checkouts, account areas, LMS progress, admin actions, and form handling often happen in real time. That's usually where weaker platforms start to show the cracks and have problems. Secondly, how stable everything stays under load. A site that feels fine with light traffic can start to fall apart as concurrency increases. And what this basically means is if you've got a shop or an LMS learning management system platform where you could have hundreds, maybe even thousands of concurrent users, that's where problems really start to lie. Third, the day-to-day essentials are simple. So handling things like your SSL, backups, restoration points, domain connections, or CDN integration should be easy. None of this is glamorous, but it affects the friction your team faces every single day. Keeping it simple makes life a lot easier for everybody involved. Now, fourth, think about migration. A lot of people stay on the wrong hosting simply because moving feels time-consuming or risky or annoying. Now, Cloudways support now offers free unlimited migrations for WordPress and WooCommerce. They also have a free migrator plugin should you want to handle it yourself. Now, that matters because once migration becomes easier, one of the biggest excuses for staying on a platform that performs badly simply disappears. So let's look at how this applies to a real platform example. One of the more relevant things Cloudways has introduced is Lightning Stack. Now, according to Cloudways, it's a rebuilt version of its flexible platform based on Nginx and PHP FPM. Designed for dynamic WordPress workloads like WooCommerce, LMS, and membership websites where caching can't do all the heavy lifting. And going back to my previous example where you may have lots of concurrent users, this is kind of important. So Cloudways says it's rebuilt the stack to improve concurrency, back-end responsiveness, and performance when requests are uncached. And that's the thing that matters because this is where agencies usually start to feel the pain first. The admin starts to get slow, checkouts get much less reliable, back-end actions start to lag, and traffic spikes expose the weak points very, very quickly. Now, Cloudways says that the Lightning Stack was built to improve back-end responsiveness, to better handle concurrency and deliver more consistent performance under pressure. In its published benchmarks, Cloudways report an up to 65% faster dynamic response times, up to 33% faster WordPress admin load times, and up to 54% more requests served under uncached stress tests. All of this sounds like a lot of numbers being thrown at you, but ultimately what it really means and boils down to is your site just becomes much more responsive, especially in the dashboard or on pages that are simply uncached. If you've ever used WordPress for any amount of time on cheap hosting, you know how annoying it gets and how quickly it gets annoying as the dashboard starts to slow down, especially if you're dealing with things like WooCommerce, where that can become painful to work with, somewhere most clients spend a lot of time dealing with the orders. Now, Cloudways also cite third-party benchmark results from Coda.io, showing up to 58% more successful WooCommerce checkouts and up to 85% higher learned dash throughput. Again, just highlighting how important choosing the right infrastructure for those uncached pages can make a big difference. So it's clear that Cloudways is targeting the parts of WordPress that performance caching doesn't solve alone. A stronger stack is not a replacement for a good build, but it is a much better foundation. Cloudways also says that Lightning Stack is available at no extra cost and can be enabled per application rather than applied everywhere by default. So this is incredibly useful for agencies and individuals and freelancers because it gives you room to test it on projects that actually need it and not have it site-wide. Okay, so we talked about what to look for. We talked about the Lightning Stack that is new in Cloudways. So let's see how we can actually implement that. I already have an account with Cloudways. I have no servers or anything set up at this point in time. So let me take you through the whole process of how we would set up a server, how we actually go about creating an application, and then how we can take a look at actually adding in the Lightning Stack to any of those applications. And application is basically just a website. It's the terminology that they use. So first things first, we're going to create our server. To do that, we're going to come over to Flexible, and we're going to come to the quick actions and say Add Server. So when we're setting up our server, we can also provision an application at the same time to kind of kill two birds with one stone. You can see we've got WordPress chosen here, and we've got options for optimized WordPress, WordPress with no optimization, and WooCommerce, and so on. I don't have to be WordPress, but in this example, it makes a lot of sense. So we'll leave it as optimized WordPress. We'll give this a name, a server name. We're going to give that a name as well, and a project name. There we go. Then you can see from this point, we can actually set up the Lightning Stack right now if we want to. So if we chose that, we'd have that enabled by default for this particular application. In this example, let's leave it off for now, and we'll come back later and add that in. So we'll just choose our hybrid stack. Then we can choose our server. Now, if you consider the server to be where all of your files reside, and you can see we can choose from DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, AWS, and so on. So we're going to just leave it as DigitalOcean, but you choose whatever you want. So when you choose a server, you'll see what it tells you down the bottom is how much it's going to cost. Now, because this is a new account, I can benefit from a 3-day trial period, so I don't have to pay anything to start off with, and I can test this out. You also notice that if we do then choose to continue with this, it'll tell us the hourly charge for this and also the monthly charge. So if we hit launch now, that's exactly what we'll be paying. However, we can fine tune this. So we can choose what database type we want, from MariaDB to MySQL. You can also choose the server type, so basic, general purpose, or CPU optimized. Again, depending upon what you're going to do will depend upon what you choose here. If you know you're going to have a site that has a lot of traffic potentially, maybe a CPU optimized option would be a good choice. You can choose, we'll go to the basic for this example, and you see we choose the different options. We have different tweaking options underneath, so we can configure this to what we want. Let's choose basic in this example, and let's say we'll choose something like a 2 GB with 2 core. So we'll just set this, and as you can see, that changes the price underneath. If we come down to 2 GB standard one, see the price changes. If we choose something like Vultr instead of DigitalOcean, again, you can see the price changes, and so do the options that we have available. So you can easily tweak this to get what you want. Let's put this back to DigitalOcean and set this to be to the 2 GB 2 core. Then we can choose whether we want premium or standard. Now, standard is going to be slightly lower performance, but premium is going to give you the kind of the top performance. And again, you'll see that is reflected in the price. So a premium with 4 GB is going to give you $54 a month, standard $46. We'll set this back though to what we want, a premium, and we're going to choose the location for our server. We'll set this to London, and once you've got everything in place, that's going to cost me $37 per month. I'm semi-happy with that. We'll click on Launch Now. and that will then create the application for us. Now, this can take several minutes to provision, and this is kind of the difference between using something like a cloud-based hosting in comparison to your traditional sort of shared hosting. So we'll wait for that to finish and come back. So there we go. There's our server and our first application all set up. And as you can see, this is now our control panel. There's our servers, there's our applications, and we can dig into any applications and find out more information about them. Now, you'll notice that we didn't enable the Lightning Stack when we created the server and applied our first site or application. So you'll notice now we get this boost your application performance, switch to Lightning Stack. It is that easy. All you need to do now is switch the Lightning Stack on. Once you do that, we choose the server that we want. So if you've got multiple servers, you choose the server that hosts the application that you want to enable this on. There's our WPTuts application when we created, selected, say switch to Lightning Stack, give that a few moments to set everything up. So now it's going to migrate that to the Lightning Stack to get everything configured and set up. We can start benefiting there from the boosts that we can potentially get from this new updated server setup. There we go. After about 30 seconds, we are done. Everything is now sorted. I can go to my applications, and that now is using the Lightning Stack. And if we create additional applications, we can choose at any point to enable the Lightning Stack to get the benefit of using that feature. And remember, there's no additional charge for this. This isn't something you're going to get billed extra for. This is part of your actual account when you create a server and apply applications or websites to that server. So no additional cost, which is obviously positive. So to wrap things up for the platform discussion, the broader takeaway is simple. When a WordPress site starts to feel slow, don't automatically assume that the builder or the tools you're using is the main issue. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's the plugin stack, and sometimes the real bottleneck is the platform underneath it all. So the better questions are these. Can your platform handle dynamic WordPress workloads properly? Can it stay stable when traffic or activity increases? Can it make backups, security, CDN setup, and recovery easier? Can it reduce the friction your team deals with every single week? And can it make migration practical when a site needs to be moved? If the answer to these questions is no, then fix the platform, not just the symptoms. Now, if you want to explore Cloudways for yourself, there's a link in the description along with a free trial and any promo codes that are currently available. So you can look through the features and decide whether it fits the kinds of projects that you're working on. As always, all those links are in the description down below. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts. And until next time, take care.